Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ethereum Core Developer Meeting slash All Core Devs Meeting number 107. We're going to jump into the agenda, but before I do that, just wanted to give a quick 10-second announcement. I said a couple months ago that I would be stepping away from the role of All Core Dev Meeting Organizer and the person who does the streams and runs the calls. Tim Byko is going to be taking up that role starting next All Core Dev Meeting. Um, so thanks everyone. I already thanked everyone last time, so I don't need to do that again. But I will be here to if Tim needs a backup, and if there needs to be something where there's a neutral party, if like Tim is conflated in something, like he's in the pocket of an EIP, and someone needs to be here to be more neutral. I'm happy to come back. So thanks again, everybody, and let's get started on the meeting. All right, so Berlin updates. EIP 2315, that is a huge topic that was talked about throughout the week, maybe even to the weekend. I'm not sure. Um, can someone who's I don't want to put you on the spot too much, light client, would it be possible for you to give like a 30-second or something summary of, like, I guess the reason why people are asking to remove EIP 2315, and if you have an understanding of the other side why people want to keep it in, kind of a thing, or we can have someone else do that. I just haven't been following chat that closely the last 24 hours to know the latest.
Yeah, I can try and really briefly introduce this. So I opened this proposal about 3 days ago, and this is an incredibly irregular proposal, and I didn't open this proposal as a political or personal agenda. I just opened it because um, I saw some comments from the Solidity team on Twitter and the ETH Magicians thread that I found pretty concerning regarding the usefulness of 2315. I introduced those threads into the all core devs chat on Discord, and there's been a ton of discussion about 2315, about the process of accepting EIPs, and I think a lot of the a lot through a lot of the discussion, we found that I believe that we found that 2315 in general seems great on the surface, but as we started digging down, it didn't quite address what it was claiming to address. It claimed that it was going to bring more efficient contracts to mainnet, and I think that the Solidity team did a reasonable job of showing that it's a very small gain of efficiency, if any, and there are other things that we could do to achieve very close levels of efficiency that aren't as big of a change as 2315. It also claimed to improve static analysis, and we still haven't had a lot of people with a strong static analysis backgrounds go through this EAP and really share their thoughts on it. But from the discussions, it appears that it doesn't really change what we have today in a big way. If anything, it increases the number of ways that the code can flow from one place to another. And I think a lot of the people who oppose removing it, despite these claims, are you know, people who don't want to set a precedent for removing EAPs to the last minute, which, I definitely understand to agree. This is like a very irregular proposal, and it's not a good precedent to set. Um, you know, I am not the right person to technically say why I don't think this EIP should go in. I'm just trying to boost the signal of other people who've shared their thoughts. Um, but I feel in terms of removing it, the best thing to do is to not put EIPs on mainnet that don't provide immediate use to people, and that's the reason that I brought this up.
And then on the other side, basically, yeah, you touched on the kind of the other side of the issue, which was this could set up a bad precedent. It's being taken out in the 11th hour. This opens up some people, not everybody, but some people have kind of said this opens up kind of, yeah, a precedent for an attack vector in the future where people can pull out EIPs at the last minute. We need to have better structure for this. And we're not going to focus today's conversation on how to improve for the future. We won't even talk too much today about how we ended up here from a process perspective, because most of us have kind of agreed in chat that the process is broken. Pieces of it weren't followed, other pieces of it were followed, but then got changed later due to us updating the EIP process, itself, after this EIP was an accepted state, and even before. So, without going into that, I want to hear other people's thoughts, especially people who have been heavily involved in this, on kind of where they stand on this, and specifically anything that like Klein or I didn't touch on as far as a perspective that we didn't hit on, like why it should be in or shouldn't be in, because I think there's a few open questions. One of them being from the Klein implementers, what's the effect of removing it in the 11th hour, as far as release times and as far as like messing up with the code base and stuff.
I'm going to ask a question, a bit different question. So, at least yesterday, I think there was a consensus that the EIP would stay, and that's it. And we were just looking for a final confirm on this call. So, did things change? Are we again debating whether to keep it or not?
Yeah, that was my question because I haven't had a chance to go through deeply into the chat except the last maybe 2 hours of chat or so, where it was kind of like not a lot of discussion going on.
I think
So
one of the
there's one
reasons that
thing that, oh, yeah, I was going to say one thing that did change over the past 24 hours since we had that kind of consensus to keep it in is the Viper team kind of came out and said it would be that 615 would, sorry, 2315 would be useful for them as like a stepping stone towards eventually having like a more complete overhaul of the EVM. But that seemed very unlikely to happen. And I think there was also some comments about whether this was actually the right stepping stone. So a lot of like what keeping it seemed predicated on the idea that Viper would be pretty excited about it. And it turns out that it might not even be very valuable for them. And that was kind of I guess, the big change in the last
right
24
Martin
hours.
claims it's not an appropriate stepping stone to like
Yeah.
have kind of this halfway functionality. Oh, is Martin here? Sorry.
Yeah, Martin actually can't make it today, and so I think we can only just take from what he said in
Gotcha.
chat.
Right. So I guess the argument here would be that even if there's a good stepping stone, it would be better to kind of take a step back and figure out like what is the longer roadmap that either it or something different is a stepping stone to, and then revisit it at some future time.
Yes, and also that there's nobody who like I guess stepped up. And again, it was a pretty short period, but it doesn't seem like there's anyone who wants to take on that whole roadmap. So it's like, why are we doing step 1 of N if nobody's going to do 2 to N? And we're not even sure if that's the right first step. But assuming it was, it just seems like there's not much interest or likelihood that the future steps will get done.
Interesting. Okay. Um, the decision ultimately comes down to client devs, as it does, because that's what they're putting into their client, and we do need to come to consensus on what goes into clients. Um, so, is Viper here? Can they give their perspective? I think we basically have solidities, but if Christian wants to give kind of a 15 or 30-second like overview of their position on if it should go in or not, if they have a firm one, that might be helpful.
I mean, I'm not a client dev.
Oh, I guess I should put it this way: from the perspective of the usefulness, that it would be in Solidity. If you could reiterate whether, in what ways it wouldn't be useful, or if it would be damaging, because that's also been a point of conflation. If it would be damaging, not in a severe sense or like a security sense, but in a tech debt weight sense.
Sure. So, I mean, at least from my point of view, the main problem with this EIP is that it never really clearly stated its goal. So it was never really possible to evaluate whether it achieves the goal. And I participated in modifying it over its lifetime. And I made some suggestions to change it. And this was with the idea in mind that that its goal is to ease some kind of static analysis, whatever static analysis means in that context. But and it ended up, we ended up disallowing flowing into it, for example. And my current point of view on that matter is that it would be better to allow flowing it if we want to have something like a jump sub return sub. Of course, from the Solidity compiler point of view, we just don't have to use the opcode, so it isn't really a negative point to have it. But it adds complexity to the EVM. It adds complexity to both EVM implementations and I don't know, other mechanisms that analyze EVM code, debuggers, tools, and also, for example, I don't know, components that run on chain and analyze code that runs on a subchain, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
And then finally, or not finally, but Danny, you just posted some stuff that Martin said in chat. That's
sorry, maybe one final
sure.
point. I mean, also the very important thing here is that this does not just add a new opcode like multiplication opcode or something like that. It fundamentally changes the control flow of, or the potential control flow of EVM programs. And it's very, very difficult to modify it after the fact.
Got it. Danny, you just posted some stuff that was like said from Martin, but it was a little out of context. What's your read on what Martin said?
I just added some context in that it seemed a lot of the people that maybe wanted to see 2315 go in kind of saw it as maybe a stepping stone to get to some of the more full functionality described in 615. And Martin was saying he was one of the co-authors of 2315, although not a champion, said that he doesn't really even see how it can be a stepping stone. Like even if someone were to champion it, it just kind of adds more technical debt along the way if that is the ultimate goal. And I shared a link to one of those direct links in Discord.
Okay.
But yeah, I picked that up in casually reading. I'm not claiming to like. Sure.
Yeah. Thank you though. What was that, James?
And another thing that came up yesterday from Martin is that even if we remove it in say next hard fork, the code, we still have to be able to have it in code to process for the blocks that it was enabled, even if it's disabled in the future. So,
got it. And then now just to try to fast track to a decision, or did anyone else have anything just off the cuff right now?
I just wanted to compliment quickly what Danny was saying that Martin said. And I think there was at some point a consensus after a lot of discussion yesterday that related to this stepping stone idea that EIP 2315 is not very useful on its own. And that's when the whole discussion on the stepping stone started.
Okay. This keeping in mind that I believe Open Ethereum has at least a release candidate that has this EIP. Nethermind has a release with or without block numbers. I'll have to get clarification on that also has this EIP. I want to keep their perspective in mind and just get that very quickly from them before we go to a full decision. So if we can start with Nethermind, where are y'all at on this, and what would... Oh, you need another release anyway? Oh, and you added BLS in the current one. Got it. Okay. So if you want to speak aloud, feel free. Otherwise, I can go to Open Ethereum.
Yeah, sure. So for us, switching in on off is technically no problem at all. It's actually just a configuration switch. So users would be even able to switch on off both PLS and EIP 2315 in the current version or the next one. We have pushed the release, but without the mainnet block numbers. However, with the testnet block numbers, and we're planning the next one where we fix the problem with PLS that we've included. And yeah, just to summarize, 2315, I was very eager to quickly act and potentially remove it as fast as possible in case there would be no one saying they would use it. And that was my reaction to Solidity's team saying that they think that that wouldn't be useful for them. Then Viper initially said it could be useful. That was enough for me to keep it included. That's why it's there. But if you say Viper team says the same, that it wouldn't be very useful, then I prefer not to have it.
Okay. Open Ethereum, if you could give your perspective on this.
Yeah, we already have release candidate in the wild, but as same as Thomas. In that mind, it's just flipping one flag and for disable it. For the 2315, if there is no benefactor of the usage of this AIP, I think we can leave it for later. Just remove it for the billing.
Okay, Besu?
We would need to do another release to take out 2315.
Okay. Does Besu have a position on whether or not to keep it in Berlin or not based on the most recent stuff? And you don't have to necessarily. It can be we are going to go with the flow, but just so that we kind of have it for the record.
Yeah, abstain for now.
Okay. And then I guess finally Geth.
Yeah, so with regard to Geth team, we did a major release, but we deliberately omitted the Berlin block numbers, specifically because this issue wasn't closed, and basically just looking back at the last 3 days, it was a different decision was made every 3 days. Every day. So either way, we must do a release before Robston, and we were aiming to do it either today. If we need to remove some code, I mean, if the decision is to actually nuke out the CIP, then probably we'll only do it on Monday, because I don't want to quickly hack out something and do a release. I don't want to assume that responsibility, but I mean, it's doable. Now, whether or not we would like to keep it in or not, well, I don't want to. I would say this is my personal opinion. I don't want to put Geth's weight in it, because since we are the majority client, we could force either way, and I really don't want us to do any of that. So we're kind of accepting whatever the decision of this call is without saying, without objecting to it. But on a personal level, I do think it is a very, very horrible thing that that we're even talking about this, specifically because there have been a lot of people put in a lot of time and this whole topic was closed. So from the perspective of those people who wrote this EIP and got it finalized, I think it's, personally, I would really question whether, so if it happens to me, I would seriously think over whether I would like to remain in this ecosystem or not. So that's my personal opinion.
Okay. Yeah.
Still, I'm at the point where so just to say, I would still say that if everybody is convinced that there's technically no merit, then obviously the choice is to get rid of it. But I do think it is still a very, very nasty move.
Understood. I think a lot of people share that concern, regardless of which side you're on, that this sets a precedent, at least temporarily, that is not very good. So I think after hearing all that, in my personal opinion, it sounds like we're leaning toward removal. I don't think there's been enough evidence so far that this is going to do anything but add tech debt if we don't have confirmation that there's going to be the stepping stone updates afterwards to really make this EIP something special. I think during the process there was things that were assumed by the core devs because of what was said in previous meetings. Light Client outlined them really in detail in a thread that's linked from the agenda. And it's actually an agenda, it's an issue in the PM repo that Greg started about the removal, or Light Client started, I forgot. But so there's kind of that angle. But all that being said, regardless of kind of how we got here, it's sounding like people want to take it out more so than not. And that although it would set a precedent, I think there's a lot of changes coming to the core developer meeting. So on a personal note, I think precedents don't have to stay, and we can do a lot to try to prevent this in the future. But on a personal note, I would lean toward taking it out, because the risk of tech debt and not being used is a greater burden on the clients, the code base, than setting a bad precedent. But anyone have other opinions that they want to speak up on now, or dispute the fact that it's looking like rough consensus is tending toward removal?
I want to echo Peter's statement that we need to be considerate of the follow-on community effects. If we only focus on, at this stage, the client in the protocol, I feel we have too narrow a view. I feel that the downstream community consequences may be subtle, but they'll be far-reaching. And I mean, it's not, we have two awful decisions to make in this, keep it in or take it out. And we need to pick the less awful one. And I have great fears that doing this at this stage, like Peter said, is going to have crippling effects on willingness of community members to contribute.
All right, I'm loving the hand raising function people are doing. Thomas and then Micah.
Yes, quickly for the process. So it may be seen as 11 hour, but I jumped very quickly to join Light Client's concerns just because I remember quite clearly. Also, I cannot find evidence that I asked this very question like over half a year ago. I looked at the CIP and asked on the call, why don't we have very clear examples of use cases of it? And the response was something about the compiler builders that they will use it. And I said, okay, I don't have that strong opinion, but it looked bad to me. And that's why when I've heard Light Client saying that Solidity team says, not very useful, I was just waiting for a single person. And I think we do appreciate work of community, but it's not about like when someone does a lot of work, it's also important to do the due diligence. It's a protocol and we care for both. Like we spend a lot of time as clients as well. We implemented immediately some work. So it's not like we rejected the CIP and we didn't say we appreciate that work. We've done it, we've tested it, we prepared it for the release. And then we've learned that the really basic due diligence of asking the potential users of the feature was not executed. And
Okay.
the questions raised, yeah.
Great. We're gonna do Micah, then Artem, Christian, Light Client, James. That might have been out of order, but either correct me or we can just go in that order.
I'll keep this quick just because I've already said it in chat, but for those that haven't followed chat, I'll give a short synopsis of the position I brought up. My concern with the 11th hour thing, which I want to keep saying that, is not so much that, oh, this is against the process. It's that engineering decisions take time. And in my career as a software engineer, there are many, 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 many times where I have been proposed a question and then given an answer. And then after I slept a night or two, my answer changed. It is difficult to reach out to everybody on a short time frame. And so, like, for example, we didn't know that Viper was going to use this until Viper just so happened to show up on Twitter, I think, and say, hey, we want this. We don't have connections to everybody. And so changing decisions at the last minute, like even if we all think today, we should take this out, that doesn't mean we're all going to think that tomorrow. And it doesn't mean that we're getting, input from the people we need to be getting input from, such as, maybe there's other people who are building tools that would really benefit from this. And we're not hearing from them because they just thought this was going to go in. They just kind of walked away. They're like, oh, I'm going to come back in 3 months when Berlin's out and write my cool tools that I'm looking forward to. So that's really my issue with the last minute thing.
Okay. Who did I say was next? Artem, maybe?
Yes. So I think we should remember one thing is that accepting EAPs, it's not about giving other people badges of honor for what they did, for the how great they are or how their proposal grade is. It's not about a badge of honor. It's about improving the protocol. And I think it is a virtue in disguise that we saw in the last minute before the hard fork that this EAP is essentially useless. I mean, consider it that we have effectively dodged the bullet, which we would have to deal with otherwise. And we got here because the current EAP process and I would say the all-core dev call process, they are both broken. And there is nothing bad about making a U-turn at the last minute if we understand that we do not need this EAP. If we don't need simple subroutines, then we shouldn't include them, even if it is at the last minute. I mean, we should improve the protocol, not scar it, and just scarring the protocol, if we know we're scarring it, is just dumbfounded.
Okay, we got Christian, Light Client, James, Tim and Vitalik.
Yeah, just also one quick comment. If you look at the history of this EIP, you see that it was always disputed, and we were always arguing about how exactly to define it. And I hope that it's not just my impression that in the end it's not clear that this is really the best version of it. And because people note that removing this EIP would create a bad precedent and would prevent people from participating in the EIP process. The other side of the coin is that there always have been concerns about this EIP. And if these concerns are just ignored, then this is just another way to basically tell people that, or to prevent people from participating in this EIP by raising concerns instead of by creating EIPs. Okay.
Got it. And then Light Client.
I definitely agree very much so with what Artem and Christian just said, but I also just wanted to say that if we were having this discussion before 2315 was included, it's pretty clear that 2315 would not be accepted given the current sentiment. And, a lot of people are saying we should be concerned about the knock-on community effects about turning things around at the very last second and how that's going to affect the people involved in EAP. But I think that there's just as much of a community knock-on effect if at the highest level of Ethereum, people are choosing to, cater towards people's feelings and how the process was done rather than making the protocol as best that it can be. And everyone on this call almost seems to agree that 2315 in its current form is not making the protocol better.
Okay. Let's see, James, and if Christian, did you have something else, or could you lower your hand?
It's a general feels bad man situation for me. But what would help me feel better is if we would, one, make sure that Light Client's issue gets added to the notes, so anyone who wants to go back to the history has an easy way of getting that from this call. And the other one is if we scheduled, say, come back in 6 weeks and make sure we have it on the docket to talk about the process and how we're going to improve it.
Okay. And then, Tim, did you retract yours?
I did, but now I guess based on James' comments, like I can totally dig into this and Light Client, you've done an amazing job already about this specific issue. But yeah, I agree. We should probably wait until we have a bit more distance to like think through what went wrong and how we can improve things here.
Yeah, there are plans to have people in the future. Like one of the process improvements for the future is to have people from the ecosystem be a liaison more so than just myself or Tim has been in the past, to connect people to review this stuff from the community or from the core devs, etc. Vitalik?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the more general point that like, it feels like even going beyond EAP 2315, we need kind of better ways to get feedback for kind of incoming EIPs earlier rather than later. I mean, even just one example of this is this removal of refunds thing that I just submitted. I think it was either 1 or 2 weeks ago. And like after this, I actually, did get some good feedback of from some applications that would be negatively affected by it in its current reform, which is like good because it kind of gives opportunities to kind of think about different versions of it and so forth. But like in all of these cases, like there's like it's always better to get that feedback even 1 week earlier rather than 1 week later, like basically when fewer people have kind of committed to it, and just make it easier for ideas to either fail fast or be modified before anyone has even tried implementing them. So I guess would be curious about people's ideas about how to kind of make that communication loop better in general.
Yeah, it's something we're already looking at with Hudson. So I suspect we'll have something to announce in the next couple weeks. But definitely, yes, something we need to be more proactive. And I think especially as we get into things that are related to the merge, or there might be some more and more breaking changes, we need to get much more proactive in reaching out to people and getting their feedback early on.
Yeah, one thing that I've started doing is just making these Reddit threads the last couple of days. Like I published one yesterday that says like, here's a list of things that might break. So, please talk about it. But if we can do more of that, I think that would definitely be helpful.
James, is your hand up for any final comments, or was it just left up?
Nope, I need to find the button again.
Okay. Thanks everyone for your comments. I thought this was really good. I think that this can definitely spur change, and it sounds to me like the rough consensus is to remove it for this hard fork. And good news being, it's a nearly complete EIP if someone does want to come in and champion it, since Greg has withdrawn as a champion and withdrawn the EIP. Per process, I believe someone can become a new champion and unwithdraw the EIP. Is that right, Micah?
Just create a new EIP. You can copy it. It's all CC0, so just make a copy of it. It's your own.
That's right. That's why. Yeah, that should have said that way. Yeah, in that case, I think it should be. I think the rough consensus is it should be removed. Does anyone have a strong veto against that? Wants to make any counter arguments? Otherwise, we can say that's the decision. Okay. So for the note taker, we'll be.
Wait.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No. So I would like to add just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should be aware of it. Is that removing EIPs is we're entering a bit of an uncharted territory in that over the past few months we had various testnets, the YOLO testnets with various transactions, and people had time to play with it. We had the test suites and everything to check it. The moment we remove an EIP, we enter uncharted territory in that we don't have a test suite which works without this EIP. We have never done a testnet which is without this EIP. So there's the risk of a consensus fault goes up astronomically. Now, in this particular case, it's a pretty standalone piece of code, so probably the dangers aren't too high. But in general, it's a super risky move.
Light Client had a comment about redoing the test suite recently. Is that not what you're addressing, though? Is this more of just a general risk thing? Oh, Peter, you're on mute if you're talking.
No, well, I was generally referring that. So nobody tested out whether. So okay, now everybody's going to remove. All the clients are going to remove their EIP implementation. Maybe we're going to do a release by Monday, and then for Robston, we'll just see if it blows up or not. So there's nobody will have time to actually try it out, that all the latest released clients properly cleaned out the EIP or not.
Okay, Thomas.
So that's the only.
Yeah, so just wanted to raise what I wrote in the chat. So according to someone, YOLO v3 syncs without EIP 2315 included, which means that was not a single test code call in the YOLO v3 for this EIP. So it's not like we actually didn't have a testnet for it included. We have it for it removed.
Interesting. Dana?
So I'm going to interrupt. That's not really fair because so this EIP was introduced way back, and the purpose of YOLO v3, everybody was focusing on transactions, on the app type transactions. And before that, YOLO v2, everybody was focusing on BLS. So the fact that YOLO v3 doesn't contain any test transactions is because everybody already assumed that that part of the code is kind of works, and it was already tested, and people were focusing on it.
So there are reference tests that cover all the scenarios of how the subroutines are supposed to work. Failing to flow in, you can't jump in, you can't enter these first, you can't pop too many off, you can't make the stack too big. Light Client over the past day or two has updated those tests and kept, there was a test in subroutines, there's also tests that verify that 5 C, D, and E opcodes are supposed to throw invalid operation exceptions. So there is a PR out there that updates the reference tests that gets us the same level of coverage we had before we decided to pull it out to verify that it's functioning properly. And there's also some hidden gems in some of the unit tests, like if you have the it's not explicitly part of the test, but if you have BLS still registered as a precompile, there are other tests that will fail. So I think we've got, well, I mean, since 2315 is not into YOLO test nets, we've got the same amount of test coverage coming out of the updated tests that Matt Garnett updated. And I just verified a few minutes ago that BASIC runs clean with them when you take out the opcodes. And that wasn't the case a few hours ago when I didn't have the invalid opcode tests put in. So it verifies that they're invalid opcodes, and it acts like they're invalid opcodes when it hits it.
Okay. So Peter, your concern was just to make a general statement, not to have a veto. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
Yep. Yes, that is correct.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Okay, in that case, it doesn't sound like there's anyone doing a strong veto against it. No one coming in with any further comments on this. Therefore, we will remove it from Berlin. Now, I think we can move on to the next part of the conversation, which is Berlin timing. Tim, did you want to kind of go over that and some stuff around Ropsten timing?
Sure. So Ropsten is scheduled to fork March 10th. This is 5 days from now. Ropsten is also proof of work and has highly unstable hash rate. So in the past, we've seen the fork vary widely in terms of when they actually happen. And now every single client needs to put out a release, to do a minimal amount of testing. And we would like to put out at least a blog post that advertises Berlin and the release numbers for all the clients. So all this to say, it seems pretty hard to do it all in like 5 days. So I guess I'm curious, what are people's thoughts about just the general Berlin schedule? Should we move Ropsten back like a week? Should we move potentially everything back? Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, my preferred approach is probably we move Ropsten back a week or something, have it fork like whenever the second testnet forks, and then keep all the other dates the same. So we only change one block number, but it's not a very strong opinion.
Okay, Dana? Or is your hand just raised from earlier? Okay. What comments do people have on this? If no one has comments, Tim, let's just make a decision.
I mean, yeah, my proposition would be we push Ropsten back a week.
I would agree.
And we need to find a new block number. We can do that. We can do that on like outside of the call. But at least this gives us, like from 5 to 12 days to have clients out and advertise the release.
Can we keep the other testnets unchanged? So push
Yes.
up 1 week. Oh, that would be great.
So that's what I would say. So I think right now it was, I believe, Ropsten, Goerli, Rinkeby, and Mainnet, and Ropsten, Goerli, Rinkeby all had 1 week apart. So then we'd have nothing next week, then Ropsten and Goerli, and then Rinkeby the week after, or something like that.
So just a quick opposition. I don't mind postponing Ropsten a bit. I think it's not healthy to have two networks fork at the same time, because then you kind of need to monitor two things, and if something goes wrong, you need to somehow fix two things. So if we want to keep the Goerli testnet numbers, I would say that maybe let's do Ropsten a day before or 2 days before. That way we can still have more time to do the releases, but let's not screw up two things at the same time.
Sure, yeah, that's fair. So right now, I'm looking at the dates. Goerli was planned for March 17th and Rinkeby for March 24th, both of which were Wednesdays. So we can absolutely do, Ropsten. I guess the thing with Ropsten is, we might have some drifting in terms of the time. So I'm not sure what would be like the right day to do between the 15th and the 26th that would make it I guess as unlikely as possible to fork at the same time as Goerli or Rinkeby.
Why can't we just try to aim, for example, Tuesday, just 24 hours earlier than Goerli?
Okay, yeah. So we can aim for the 16th of March for Ropsten.
Oh.
What was that, Peter? Oh, Peter might be off me. Okay, he's good now.
I was just saying that yes, that would be my guess.
Artem,
It's always a risk with the block numbers, but
got it. Artem, did you have a comment or did you retract it with your hand raise?
Well, I do have a comment that given the screw up that we had with 2315, maybe we should push back everything a week and then go on Twitter, go on Ethereum Magicians, go on other discussion forums and gather more feedback on the current Berlin EAPs, because maybe 2315 is not the only contentious EAP that didn't get enough feedback.
oh God, no. Please not doing it.
Yeah, well, I guess
I'm strongly against pushing it back.
Yeah, I would be too, personally, just because, like, a lot of them have been vetted completely. I feel like, in our opinions, or someone correct me if I'm wrong, but does anyone have an opinion that any of the other EAPs have had any wishy-washy feelings during the time of their bringing that up during stuff like, or that it's not been straightforward with stuff like testing or things like that?
Well, just to make it explicit, right? Like the other EAPs is a gas cost change, 2565, which has been benchmarked. And, like the impact of that is just gas pricings. Then the other big EAP is 2929, which also is a gas cost change. And the two other EAPs, 2718 and 2930, are EAPs that are there to mitigate the impact of 2929. So that means that, the two only things we need to assess the value for are the gas cost changes. And those are things that are much less, we know that there will be breakage in the community, from 2929, and we've dealt with that with 2718 and 2930. But in terms of just like, does this provide value to users? It's much more straightforward than adding a new feature, because we're just changing the gas costs.
Okay, Offrey?
I would actually propose to keep the block numbers even Robston and just make sure that we have a miner on the correct chain, because I believe if we can have releases out by Monday, then we can have a fork on Robston as soon as possible. And once we hit the actual fork number, we could just have Robston as a very early test bed.
I guess the counter to that is, are the releases going to be on Monday? Which I thought we said that they were going to be Tuesday, maybe, some of them. Or later.
Tuesday, yes, but this coming week versus the pushback we're talking about is for 2 weeks. Like if Geth releases on Monday, we're then waiting till another full week before we release to Robston, is what's currently proposed.
Oh, okay. So are you agreeing with that, Offrey? I think I'm confused on the dates, maybe. If you could go over again what you were proposing.
So the Robston, I just did the math. If we assume a 13.8 second block time on Robston, then we have exactly 4.98 days. So it's 5 days for Robston. And if we see which is 1, 2, 3, yeah, that's actually Wednesday. So if we have releases by Monday or Tuesday, and we as core developers or client developers or other enthusiasts in this broader group here, make sure that you have proper miners running on the correct chains, and we could just stay on this date on Wednesday, even though it might cause breakage, but then we have early insights into this hard fork on Robston, and we can start testing whatever we want to test with Berlin on Robston earlier instead of delaying it another week. That's my proposal, but it's just completely up to you.
Dana?
If history's a guide, Robston's going to fork no matter what day we put on it, because miners put zombie miners on there and they forget to update it. And there's going to be a fork that does not have it. So, this is probably a good thing if we organize, we get more people to get more hash power on the fork side whenever we do it. But to take a couple steps back, my top preference would be to leave it in. My second close preference is to leave it in and do it on schedule. And the one that I would have issue with is if we touch the mainnet block. When I talk about community effects, that's another thing that's going to come on if we set a block and then pull it back too often. Those are the kind of following community effects. So I think we need to make, if we're going to take it out, we need to be, and do it at this late an hour, we need to be willing to go to extreme lengths to keep the train on time.
Okay, other thoughts?
Just to summarize some of the dates that Nethermind said they would have something by Sunday, Open Ethereum would have something today, it sounds like, or the next day, and then Geth said they would have something they would be able to release on Monday.
Okay.
So Afri's plan could technically work, assuming that's also true for Besu.
And Afri's plan is keeping the same block number, right? Just so if I'm going to be reminded.
Yep, keep the block number and make sure we have a miner ready to mine in case something's happening.
Okay.
More than one miner, right? Like, I think to be safe, we probably want all the client teams ideally to start a miner on Robston.
If possible, yeah. I'm okay with that. Tim, is there anyone else have like a strong opinion of changing it? Yeah.
My preference is changing as little as possible, and then more time on a testnet's generally a good thing. So if we can get away with it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it would be great if we can get a commitment from the different client teams that they can run a Robston miner, and then at least we'll know there's at least like 4 entities mining the right chain on Robston, and you know, that should be like, yeah.
If we need miners, you can always just rent it off of NiceHash. There's enough mining power on NiceHash to mine Robston solo, I believe.
I don't think it's necessarily about.
Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Sorry, I think I have a slight delay. So I don't think it's necessarily about hash power, more than we should ensure that every client has a miner so that we know that things are in consensus.
Yeah, and that people are paying attention pretty closely to it. Yeah.
I think the EF can do that. I can talk to the DevOps team and ask. I don't see why the EF couldn't do it. I think we've done it before.
I would personally prefer if every client ran their own miner, because then at least they can monitor if things go wrong and react.
Oh, of course. I'm just saying sorry, when I say EF, I mean, can Geth run their own miner? That would be through the EF's infrastructure. Peter, can you give an up down on that?
I honestly don't care. I can run it on my own laptop too.
Oh, okay, cool. Other clients, can anyone commit to doing that? Or at least a majority of clients commit to doing that?
Yeah, I already had one set up with the 2315 code. I'll just make the changes and then push up the miner again.
Okay, Nethermind.
We run Robston nodes, but we will not be running a miner.
That's fine.
I can help with. I have a computer I could turn on for mining.
And to monitor. Okay.
Well, to do the Nethermind, help Nethermind be miner.
Yeah, and it's again less about hash power. It's that we have a chain that is running that we can be testing on while things are crazy on Robston until it gets corrected. And then Open Ethereum.
Yeah, I think we have one validated on Robston, but to be honest, I need to check that.
Okay. Okay. I think it's leaning toward let's keep things the same and just be extra diligent on that day to monitor the situation with everyone having their own Robston node on the right chain.
And then let's talk offline, Tomas, about how I could help.
Okay. Any other comments on this, Peter?
Yeah, just a question. So we've mentioned that Light Client already did the updated tests. As far as I know, that's just an open PR. Is there any chance of having that PR merged in so that people can actually pull an updated repo and test it? Just, it would be nice to have the tests in the repo updated before we make the release.
Is anyone from the test repo here?
I guess Martin will be back Monday is my assumption.
I can work synchronously with anyone who can help get it merged, as soon as ACD is over. I just don't have the control of merging it.
Is Martin the only person that can merge the testnet result?
So there's a couple people on the Ethereum test team. I just don't know what time zone they're in.
Yeah, there's Dimitri. He's and a couple other ones, but I'd be comfortable as long as we sort of say, "Hey, light client, make sure that this happens," and then if you can agree to do that.
Yeah, so as long as we can find someone, James, can you help light client find someone? I guess it would probably be Dimitri or Martin, and Dimitri is Russia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So I don't do time zones well, so I don't know if it's night or day for him, but yeah. Let's go ahead. So Peter, that's a good idea, and let's work toward that. And James, if you can get with Light Client, and then Light Client, if you need any other help, just go into All Core Devs chat, and we can try to connect you too.
Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. We're not changing anything about the timing then. The Berlin announcement. Me, Pooja, Tim, James, and Trent, and a few other people are working on that. It's going to be a blog announcement that's cross-blog, meaning the blog.ethereum.org will not be the only place it's posted. It's going to be posted across stuff like MyCrypto's blog, Status and Nimbus's blog. I think Gitcoin has a blog we're posting it on. So everyone's going to have the same blog updated, and we're all syncing in a chat room about that. That's to kind of start to spread the word better, and also make it so that the EF isn't the only one. Like, it's less of a factor if, like, that blog of the EF gets hacked and people change the block number or put some crazy announcement or emergency fork. It just makes it a little better that we start making it a habit to decentralize the announcement. Anything else on that, Tim or James or anyone? When's that?
No, it's great.
When were we going to put that out? Like Tuesday maybe, or just when the client teams release their update?
Yeah, as soon as we have all the client teams release, the blog post is literally ready, and there's just a placeholder for every client team.
Cool. Monday at the earliest then. That is it with Berlin updates. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being cordial and having a good decorum as well. Go ahead, Micah.
The announcement is for the mainnet fork block. Is that correct?
All of
when
them.
you're talking about.
For all.
Because I think Nethermind is not. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Thomas. Nethermind's not planning on putting the mainnet fork block in the release that's coming up.
We can now if everyone else pushes the mainnet block. If that's agreed, we are fine now. I didn't want to do that 2 days ago, but it's fine now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily a requirement that we're making all the clients do that either. That I think we left up to clients.
No, we said, it would be best if everybody's on the same page, just so it's simple. Like, it's not the end of the world, but it is simpler if we can just say this is the client version for everybody, rather than saying, this is like for testnets for Nethermind, for mainnet for Besu, for testnets for Open Ethereum, for mainnet for Geth. It's not the end of the world, but if all the clients can have the mainnet block, it simplifies it a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, if we need to push it anyway, everyone will have to make some update quickly. So I hope we don't have to push it unexpected. So we'll include the mainnet block as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have the infrastructure up to make a wide announcement to the community if we do have to push it. But that obviously is something that is not planned right now. It would have to be a security or other type of thing that would happen. All right, anybody else before we move on to potential London EIPs? All right, let's get to it. First one. This one has some popularity behind it. I've heard of this one before. EIP 1559, a fee market change. There's a link in the agenda where when you click on it, it goes to the issues where Tim talks about, oh wow, there's a lot of emoji upvotes on this one and other stuff. About the proposal to include it. There's a little bit of discussion in there. Tim, since you've more or less been the champion of this in the last year or something, if you want to go over where you think it is and why it should be in London and what it is, I guess, in a sentence, what it is, and then the rest of it.
So Sure. So 1559 was put forward a few years ago by Vitalik. It changes the Ethereum fee market. We've discussed it a few times on All Core Devs before. And you know, the first few times it was discussed a couple of years ago, there were some technical concerns raised about it, and then about I think exactly a year ago now, yeah, the Besu team started championing it from a technical perspective again to try and address some of those concerns that were raised by all core devs. After about a year, I think we're there. So we've linked kind of an issue in their issue with all of the kind of client changes we've done. We've solved issues around how we handle legacy transactions, how we deal with the transaction pool. Berlin will solve some issues regarding denial of service attacks that were potentially problematic because of the large block size under 1559. So I think we're in a spot where the EAP is kind of sound. There's definitely a lot of work to do around everything that's kind of adjacent to the EAP. So updating all of the JSON RPC specs and whatnot. And we've started some of that work, but it's not complete. But I think that from Oh, Abdel comments. Abdel is the technical lead on Besu who's worked on this, but he adds a comment that we've done also an economic analysis of 1559, which was done by Tim Roughgarden, who's a leading professor in the field of game theory and computer science. And we've also done a lot of performance testing recently. So we basically created a test net that had a state as big as mainnet and bombarded it with transactions for a long time to see if nodes could process them, and it looked like everything was fine there. So all this to say, I think we're in a spot where it's ready to be included in an upgrade. There's still some work that we'll need to do with regards to, like I said, JSON RPC, some more reference tests and whatnot. But that's a pretty standard thing when we tend to include EAPs. And I think there's, I guess, a few reasons why we should make a decision about it for London sooner rather than later. The first is it's quite a big change. So if we do include it in London, I think it becomes kind of the big thing we can do in London, especially given the timelines are quite short, and it'll have a big impact on what else we can do. Yeah, and that's probably the biggest one. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Oh, okay, thanks. Other comments on this? There may not be much because everyone's pretty familiar with this by now, I would hope. It's been pretty highly advertised in the community. Anyone have comments? Otherwise, I can give my comment on the call that happened recently. Yes, Peter?
I have one tiny comment. So if we go down the path of including 1559, then my request is to couple it together with the deletion of the refunds or the rework of the refunds, depends on where that EIP goes. Because the problem with refunds is that they essentially can double the amount of gas that can be consumed in a block. And 1559 can also do the exact same thing, which means we can end up with a 4x block size. And that's a bit screwy. So it would be nice to, essentially, if we can include the removal of refunds, then that actually stabilizes a bit the effect of 1559. So that would be my request.
One question there. So and we're going to talk about this, I think, right after, but there's like 3 proposals for dealing with refunds now. One of them is we straight up remove them, but then the 2 other ones are kind of more moderate in that they over time phase them out and whatnot. I assume if we have a proposal where the refunds are phased out rather than removed directly, we'll be in a spot where for a few, I don't know, for a few months probably, you would still have 1559 and refunds, mostly possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not in favor of any of the phasing out approaches because I just don't really see what benefit they have. I do have a couple of ideas for how to do something a little bit more moderate than removing refunds completely. So like, for example, I have one proposal where you have a version of refunds where the refunds can only cancel out the 20,000 gas cost for adding new storage. And I'll probably like formalize that into an EAP at some point. But like, we definitely need a little bit more time to kind of just juggle between the different options and come to consensus on which ones are better.
So how much time is that though? Because I think we're wanting to figure out in the next, well, how long? 2 weeks or so? Like, yeah.
I think if we put our minds to it, we could get to it in 2 weeks.
Okay. Peter, did you have something before, and then William after that?
So I just wanted to react to, I think, Tim's comment that there may or may not be a time period when both refunds and EIP 1559 is active. From Geth's perspective, I mean, since Berlin already makes storage access a bit more expensive, that removes the problem. I mean, I wouldn't say removes the problem, but alleviates a bit the problem. Plus, in Geth, we do ship snapshots, which if basically with snapshots, we're pretty happy that we don't know of any denial of service vectors that people could abuse. So from our perspective, it's kind of fine from the client, from a technical perspective, that if there's a time period when gases are a bit screwy, it's more like on a long term, it's healthier for everybody if the block times are stable and people can. So the thing is that if the block time is super stable, then you can easily decide whether you want to bump the gas limit or not. Whereas if the gas limit can, or the block time can vary 4x, then it's much harder to say that, hey, let's bump the gas limit, because you don't know what the effect is. So that's mostly the perspective why stability is always good.
Okay, real quick, Vitalik, if you want to give a retort to that, because I think you were wanting to say something, and then we'll have William introduce himself and speak up.
Well, more an agreement than a retort, but just generally, I wanted to point out that like gas prices are very high, and a lot of users are suffering as a result of this, and there's millions of dollars being spent on transaction fees a day. So like I personally am in favor of some like moderate gas limit increase and doing what we can to create safety margins so that that actually can happen safely. So reducing variance, like basically, if we have room, it's probably better to spend that room on an increase than it is to spend it on a proposal that'll just allow more variance to exist for some short time.
Okay, so this is about, yeah, Peter's bundling comment that from a Geth perspective, they would want one of these in there to kind of help hedge some of the stuff that 1559 would enable. William, did you have something on 1559? And if you could give an intro to yourself.
Oh, hello, I'm William Morris. I'm a co-founder of BitCog. We do DEX trading, and among other things, we market make gas tokens. Specifically, while we're on the topic of 1559, I've mentioned in the Discord the possible fork choice issue. I think we should keep that discussion on Discord for now. If that is a major concern, it could mean that 1559 does not provide elasticity even in the short term. But regarding Forex specifically, I don't think Forex is a huge issue as a temporary state growth situation, or even block processing time, because Ethereum is so underutilized right now. Quantitatively, I believe we can validate blocks about 1,000 times the current size. There's especially after 2929, which would mitigate a lot of the DOS effects of, for example, S-load. But I'd prefer to table the rest of this until we're on topic for refunds.
Okay. Vitalik, did you have something?
Not on this topic.
Okay, and then Peter, did you have something on what William said, or on 1559?
Yeah, I just wanted to retort on that 1,000 time block processing. So essentially, currently, you can create super heavy blocks for the network. So given a 10x, even a 10x increase, I'm fairly confident we can stop the network. And we're not talking about 1,000 time increase. We're talking about a 10x increase.
Yeah, I guess, like, to be clear, like when I say I'm in favor of moderate increases, I was referring to numbers like 15 to 20 million, like definitely not these big multiples that people are still thinking of.
Okay, and we're tabling that for a moment until we get to that piece, which will be after difficulty bomb delay. For 1559, are there any other final things? I mean, I've been seeing indications personally that everyone's in favor of this. A lot of the core developers have participated in either the testing or review of this. I don't really see any opposition except from miners, and that was addressed in part, or not addressed, that's the wrong word. It was, I guess, able to be viewed by everyone, but from a call that we had recently, a community call that the Ethereum cat herders put on, where we had participants from different mining pools and then different stakeholders in the ecosystem giving their opinion. And what came of that was, in general, from everyone that I talked to some people who watched the meeting and kind of looked at the comments online about the meeting, and it seemed like the miners were in the minority of people who did not want this in, primarily because it would be cutting into their block reward incomes, or their transaction fee income specifically. And there was some risk, in their opinion, of either a network split, some of them thought, or security issues with hash rate dropping, things like that. If I didn't get that right, someone can correct me, but that's kind of what I got from the miner's perspective. Otherwise, what else do people have to say on 1559 before we kind of go to a yes or no?
I had just a question, because the timing of London is going to be pretty determined by addressing the Ice Age. So I just wanted to make sure that core devs, that the clients all were comfortable with the amount of work and time we have to implement 1559 in all the clients that haven't already done so.
Difficulty bomb delay was going to be shooting for what? I guess, when do we think the difficulty bomb's going off?
It's like July, around July was when we were going to do London to address it.
Yeah, so we need to be ready for July on mainnet. It might be later, but I think it's good to aim for July. That means that, the testnets need to fork in June, and like in May, we basically need to set the fork and be kind of done. So that means that we basically have March and April to like implement and test the EAPs, right?
Are there clients with concerns about the timing? And Vitalik, did you have a comment? Your hand is still raised.
Oh, sorry, the hand being raised was a mistake. I'm lowering it.
No problem. All right, Thomas, did you have an opinion? You put it in chat. I didn't know if you wanted to also say it.
Yeah, I think that EIP 1559 is such a big and important change that I definitely wouldn't like to delay it by just long discussions about other EIPs being included or not in London. So I have two proposals, either to separate EIP 1559 release into its own thing, its own network upgrade with any other EIPs needed for it to behave properly. But I don't think there are any necessary, or to start talking about Shanghai at the same time as we talk about London, so we can show community that if they discuss the EIPs, there is a slightly longer timeline after EIP 1559, after London, that they should discuss inclusion in. So, yeah.
Very good point.
Just quick comment with regards to the EAP that have to go in with 1559. I think one that we do want is the difficulty bomb delay. And the reason is that if we don't have it coupled together, miners can just decide to not upgrade, and it makes it much easier for it to stay on the old chain. It's and they can still do that if the difficulty bomb is pushed back. Like, it's not a completely it's not a very hard technical change, but it does mean that they would need to actually fork a client, make a release, and whatnot.
It's not a big problem to fork the client, really.
It is to distribute it, though, right? There's a difference. Like, yes, it's a small technical change, but then miners have to go out and advertise, download like our, get-miner fork and use that. And then there's not much of a value prop there. Whereas if they just stay on the old chain, they don't need to actually convince people to go and download and move over to their chain. So the technical part is the small one. The coordinating around a new chain part is the very hard one. And I think that's like the main value we get from the difficulty bomb being coupled with 1559.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense to couple it. It's a very small change technically, and it's important one to schedule ahead. And yeah, sorry, I just omitted it, but it's quite obvious that it could go in together.
Yeah,
Micah?
yeah.
And I would hard agree with Thomas's point of we should minimize what goes into London and be open to talking about stuff that's interesting and we want to go in. We can talk about Shanghai for timing for stuff like that.
Micah?
So I'm totally good with 1.5 going at the same time as the Ice Age bomb removal. What I'm not a fan of is using the bomb to effectively coerce people to choose the same choice as us. The whole idea with centralized governance and fork-based governance is that if you don't like a change, you just don't fork. You go your own way, and that's okay. Like ETC was okay. People had a difference of opinion. It was very strong. They have their own chain now, and that's a healthy thing. I'm not a fan of basically saying, hey, us core devs like this thing. If you users don't like it, now, we're going to bundle it with this thing that's going to break you, sort of thing. I'd much rather make sure that we keep those two things separated. Like fork-based governance is all about freedom of choice, and I don't like leveraging our position of this difficulty bomb to kind of make it very hard to make a different choice than us, to disagree with the core devs.
So would every difficulty bomb delay need to be its own single fork, Micah, in your proposal or your opinion?
No, like from an organizational standpoint, I think that if 1559 happens already when the fork goes out, from coordination wise, it's easier to do one fork in July than to have two forks in July, because that's a huge pain in the ass. I just don't like, just from a kind of policy standpoint, trying to use difficulty bomb as a forcing function to get people to agree with the change that we think is best for them. Like if they want to agree it's a good change for them, then they should join us willingly and voluntarily, not because they have to.
Okay, noted. Peter?
I would just like to say that the point of the difficulty bomb is to force people. I mean, that was its original goal. We can debate whether it's good or bad, but I mean, let's not kid anyone. That's the goal of it.
Got it. Okay. So we will. I think we're all rough. Or actually, there's a few other people. Hold on. Dragan and Thomas. Or Thomas, is your hand still up for a comment, or did you just get raised accidentally?
Yes, please.
Oh, go ahead.
So I think the difficulty bomb has this great property of ensuring that in the cases when something like group of miners wants to execute a fork, that they also make a promise to the fork users that they will be capable of executing the forks to remove the bomb, because it ensures that any forks are not just simple split, announce to everyone that it's all fine and never know how to work on the client, but any fork will actually have to ensure the community being able to distribute the clients and so on. So it is a good tool of coercion, but also protection for anyone who will be dragged to a potential forked chain.
Dragan?
If somebody wants to fork without difficulty bomb, they just can use any client, just make adjustment to the client itself. It's not a big hurdle to just fork away. But I think difficulty bomb in general is good timeline, 59.
Okay.
Even for somebody that didn't even start on that topic.
To move on from this, unless there's I guess I'll put it this way: 1559, we're seeing mostly yes, except for miners. Difficulty bomb, we're seeing mostly yes. There's a little bit of trepidation from a few people about combining them because of some of the user technical barrier, adoption barrier arguments, user choice arguments. But does anyone oppose to 1559 at any point going in the future or going into London? All right, is anyone opposed to the difficulty bomb happening? I don't think anyone is, because it kind of has to, or else the chain slows down. This is not to say they should go together yet. So, because now the third question is anyone strongly, like a client dev specifically who'd be implementing this, strongly enough opposed to not putting them together that we should have a further discussion on this before making a determination of where the difficulty bomb goes? Because it sounds like no one wants to separate the forks, even Micah.
And it's worth saying that the timing of them doesn't matter necessarily. The order would potentially matter if you decoupled them. If you had 1559 before the difficulty bomb, then effectively, if you don't want 1559, you have to defuse the difficulty bomb potentially on your own once you fork and don't do the 1559 chain. Whereas if you do it after, it changes kind of the dependency there. So it's not just decoupling, order.
Got it. Okay. Thomas, did you have a comment?
No, sorry.
Peter?
So my comment in general is that if we believe that 1559 is the correct path towards, correct path forward for the entire network, then I don't really see the whole point of this whole. So essentially, by decoupling the two things, the only thing you achieve is that you give people who just figure that they don't want 1559, you give them a super simple tool to just say that, hey, let's fork Ethereum because we don't like 1559. And in my opinion, there's no, I'm not aware of any technical reason or any reason at all why 1559, why somebody would oppose it. However, you can always dream up a group of people who will be very, very vocal and who will try to fork Ethereum. And forking Ethereum is a super lucrative thing. Even if it only survives for a week, you can make immense amount of money on it, trading and speculating and whatever. So I don't think so. If there's no technical reason for giving people the opportunity to easily fork off, then I don't think we should make it easy. Of course, everybody, as also Dragan also mentioned, everybody can modify the clients. It's not particularly hard to modify the clients, but if you actually want to bring up a new Ethereum Classic or Ethereum 2 Classic or whatever, then you should be prepared to actually do the work and not just piggyback on the existing clients.
Okay.
Something I don't know if we got an answer that the client. So if we have the next 3 months to do development for 1559, are all the clients feel comfortable with that amount of window to do the work required?
Are there any clients who do not feel comfortable doing that amount of work required? Speak up. Peter, your hand's still raised. I don't know if it was about this or not.
Oh, apologies.
Okay, I think everyone feels comfortable with the timeline then, it sounds like. So let's do this. I think we're in agreement, rough consensus, at least, about 1559 going in, the difficulty bomb going in order to make sure that this chain doesn't slow down, and that they would both be going in for London. Is there anyone with very strong opinions against that plan to have them both included for London officially? Okay, great. The next
and sorry,
yeah, go
two
ahead.
small technical comments. So one, if that's the case, we should probably set up, I guess it'll be YOLO v4. Maybe we need a new name, whatever, as soon as we have the client's implementations ready. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second technical comment is there's another EAP that's like I guess call it a sister EAP to 1559, which just adds an opcode to return the base fee. It's something that smart contract developers have asked for. We just removed it from 1559 specifically because just separation of concerns. I'm not sure exactly what the EAP number is. Abdel is the author. But I guess, does anyone oppose also having a base fee upcode along with 1559? And it's fine. We can maybe decide that later.
I have one comment on that one. So I don't oppose or support it either way. The only comment I wanted to make is that what we should think over is not to give people an opportunity to again play with the gases and so we don't want a new generation gas token. So if there's a legitimate reason why checking the gas fee or base fee would be useful. I mean, we can consider it, but I think we should really strongly consider it from a perspective of not enabling some weird games
Okay.
again.
So I think we can maybe have a proper discussion about that EAP, in the next call or the one after. It's a tiny technical change if you have done 1559, but I'm fine with us not agreeing to include it now.
I remember writing up a list of like reasons why it would be a good thing, but I'm happy to like rewrite it and put it in whatever thread you point me to is best.
Great. That let's definitely, because this isn't on the next part of the agenda, maybe bring this up for next time for inclusion for London, if it's going to be a possibility. And by then, Vitalik can point us his resources in the right direction, and we can have more chat in the All Core Dev discussion and Discord about it. Does that sound good, Tim?
Yeah, I'll add it
So
to the next call's agenda.
And we should.
Yeah, sorry. Just one thing I wanted to say is that probably it would be nice to get Alexei also in on that discussion, because I remember that a while back he was really vocal about removing all kinds of gas inspections, and he had his reasonings on why those would help. So it's just, if he has a whole list of reasons why he thinks people should not have access to the gas, maybe it would be also nice to get his input on it.
That's a good idea. Thomas?
So it's possible to inspect base fee even without the base fee code, but at quite a expensive operation gas code wise, and we've been doing it in one of the projects, and base fee just simplifies it a lot. And also I think both Alexei's and mine complaints about gas inspection were more about the amount of gas, because it opens a lot of problems, but the base fee itself is more like a gas price opcode, so it just gives information about the economical environment of the transaction. It doesn't really affect the EVM execution in any way, because base fee is only charged before any EVM code is executed, the same as gas price. It's not really related to the execution flow.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. That's why I was saying that I'm not opposed to the opcode. I'm just saying we should ask the people who might be opposed that they can speak up. Maybe they won't be opposed either.
Yeah, I agree. Let's not do 2315 again and remove it 2 days before the fork.
Yeah, good call. Okay. All right, so we are in agreement for note taker 1559 in London, 3238 in London. Next discussion, we will be talking about the space fee thingy, and if that would be in London, because that does kind of go along with some of the fee market change stuff. Next up, we only have 3 minutes left, but I know William Morris, who's the author, I think he's the author of the EIPs for 3300 or 3322. He'll tell us which ones. We've talked about 3298 disabling gas refunds from Vitalik before in a different call. So with the last few minutes, I'd like just a quick summary from William of the 2 phase out and the efficient gas storage, if they wrote that one, in order to discuss what those are, so that we can start commenting in the issues in the agenda. And just to be clear, if anyone has a comment on it that they don't want to put in the core dev chat, or that is maybe longer form, you can go to the issue and the agenda. And the way we have the agenda set up now, the issue section is for long form discussion on agenda topics that go multiple meetings. So all that being said, William, go ahead and just in the last, just quickly 2 minutes, just kind of go over what you proposed.
So the strongest motivation for removing refunds seems to be that there's a limited capacity, and that on average we need to be well below that. In particular, we should already be well below 1/4 capacity so that nodes can sync within a year. My 1000x number is based on a TurboGeth fork running Binance Smart Chain. Binance Smart Chain is already running 20x gas per second and still syncs quickly. So I'm skeptical of Peter's 10x number, and specifically the warning that it might stop. Perhaps there are performance improvements there. I definitely support increasing the gas limit, and then 1559 the gas target. So quickly, gas tokens track the gas price. Liquid refunds such as gas tokens have 2 prices, the break-even price and the break-even sell price. Bots mint and sell in the same transaction, which forms a gas buy wall. So if you're using less gas than them, you can use their pricing for a patient safe flow. On the other hand, the break-even burn price reflects the price at which it becomes cost-effective to buy and burn gas tokens. Potential bandwidth is almost doubled at this inflection point, so it serves as a great standard gas price oracle. During sustained congestion, the fast gas price can remain above this level for days, but they eventually converge. Similarly, when someone dumps their gas tokens, the buy wall cancels and moves to a lower price. So I was able to precisely call the bottom following the 32.98 posting. The benefits of the refunds is that they provide block elasticity by moving space from less valuable blocks to more valuable blocks. A lot of the opposition is that this comes with state bloat because of the current way that we get refunds, specifically by SStore and self-destruct. 3322, as proposed, would create a more efficient refund that would outcompete what's the current bloat. So I believe that it might be strongly superior enough from a market basis to outcompete the existing and the most significant concerns. We'd still be able to stabilize gas price that way. And the block elasticity would still be limited by the refund count. Those are my opening statements.
Okay, perfect. We don't have time for any rebuttals on that, sadly, but if anyone does have a rebuttal on that, could you please post it in the agenda topic? You can click on EIP 3300, phase out refunds. That's number 258, issue number 258, and also talk about it in the core dev chat. William, you're in the ETH R&D Discord for questions, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So William can be found there for any rebuttals on that. And then, let's see. And then, yeah, we're out of time. So thank you, everybody. Sorry, everybody who came on to discuss their potential London EIP and it didn't get in on this call. We had some unexpected Berlin stuff to go over, but thank you all for showing up, even if it was earlier time. Thank you all so much for having me do these the last few years, and let's all get excited for Tim taking this over. He's going to do a great job. And thank you all so much. We'll have another meeting in 2 weeks on the 19th of March, 1400 UTC. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Hudson.
Thanks, Hudson.
Thanks, Hudson.
Clap
Thank
for
you.
Hudson.
Thanks, Hudson.
Thanks, Hudson.